The snow doesn't just fall in the Black Ridge Mountains. It hunts. It waits for a lapse in concentration, a tear in your thermal gear, or a mechanical failure. I've spent 12 years as a high-altitude rescue technician, and I've learned that the mountain is a living, breathing entity that dislikes intruders. But nothing in my 12 years prepared me for the silence that greeted me at Outpost 0. My name is Elias Thorne. My mission was supposed to be a routine supply drop and personnel rotation. The Outpost is a specialized atmospheric research station perched on a jagged shelf of granite, 7,000 meters above sea level. It's home to a 4-person team of some of the brightest minds in meteorology. They hadn't checked in for 48 hours. In this weather, 48 hours is the difference between a cold dinner and a frozen corpse. As my snowcat ground its way up the final ascent, the headlights cut through a blinding whiteout. The wind howled, a constant, mournful roar that sounded like 1,000 voices screaming at once. When the silhouette of the outpost finally emerged from the gloom, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The exterior floodlights were off. The main radar dish, which should have been rotating, was locked in a fixed position, coated in a thick layer of rime ice. Outpost 0, this is Thorne. I am at the perimeter. Do you copy? Static. Just the hollow, electronic hiss of a dead frequency. I cut the engine. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy enough to feel like a physical weight on my shoulders. I stepped out, the sub-zero air instantly biting at the exposed skin around my goggles. I moved toward the main airlock, my boots crunching on the crystallized snow. The door was unsecured. Not just unlocked, but slightly ajar, allowing a drift of snow to invade the pressurized vestibule. Inside, the emergency red lights pulsed like a dying heartbeat. I drew my flare gun, the only weight of comfort I had. Is anyone here? Sarah? Miller? No answer. I entered the mess hall. It was a snapshot of a moment frozen in time. A half-eaten bowl of oatmeal sat on the table, the spoon still upright in the congealed mass. A mug of coffee was tipped over, the dark stain dried into the metal surface. It looked as if they had simply vanished into thin air in the middle of a sentence. I moved to the communications hub. The monitors were flickering, displaying lines of nonsensical code, double helix patterns and points of convergence that made no sense for weather data. In the center of the desk sat the logbook. I flipped to the last entry, dated 2 days ago. It wasn't written by the lead researcher, Dr. Eris. It was a frantic scrawl, the ink smudged as if the hand writing it had been shaking uncontrollably. The frequency isn't coming from the storm. It's coming from beneath the ice. We opened the seal to the core drill site. Something followed the signal back up. It's not a sound anymore. It's a pressure. A song that resonates in my bones. A sudden, violent tremor shook the station. The floor groaned, and several ceiling tiles clattered to the ground. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked out the reinforced observation window. The whiteout was clearing, but what I saw wasn't the mountain. The sky had turned an impossible shade of iridescent violet. And emerging from the drill site, a massive vertical shaft meant to study ancient ice was aglow. Not the yellow of fire or the white of LED, but a ghostly, bioluminescent blue that pulsed in sync with the tremors. I heard a sound, a wet, sliding sound, like something heavy being dragged over metal. It was coming from the corridor leading to the sleeping quarters. I flattened myself against the cold steel wall, my breath coming in ragged plumes of frost. The sliding sound grew closer. Slith tink, slith tink. It was rhythmic, punctuated by the metallic click of something sharp striking the floorboards. I peered around the corner. A figure was standing at the end of the hall. It was Miller, the station's engineer. But he wasn't standing, he was swaying. His back was turned to me, his thermal suit torn to ribbons. His skin, where visible, was no longer human. It had an iridescent, bluish tone, adorned with what looked like black pearls embedded directly into the flesh. Miller, I whispered, my voice cracking. The figure stiffened. With a series of sickening cracks, his neck rotated 180 degrees. His eyes were gone, replaced by vertical, snake-like pupils that glowed with a terrifying golden light. He didn't speak. He unhinged his jaw, and a sound came out that wasn't a human voice. It was a deep, resonant vibration that made my teeth ache. I didn't wait. I turned and bolted back toward the airlock. As I ran, I passed the infirmary. The door was wide open. Inside, I saw the other two, Sarah and Dr. Eris. They were fused together in a horrific embrace, their bodies rewritten into a single terrifying mass of blue skin and shimmering scales. They weren't dead. Their eyes, 6 of them now, tracked me as I passed, filled with a silent, eternal terror. I reached the airlock, but the inner door slammed shut before I could grab the handle. The electronic lock engaged. I was trapped. A voice filled my mind. It wasn't a sound. It was a pressure that felt like drowning. Why do you run, Elias? You are compatible. The first compatible one in 1,000 rotations. I turned to see a woman standing in the center of the mess hall. She wasn't there a second ago. She was tall, nearly 3 meters, with skin the color of deep-sea oil and 2 massive, curved horns sprouting from her head. She moved with a fluid grace that defied the station's cramped quarters, her lower body trailing a long, scaled appendage that shimmered with every movement. "What are you?" I gasped, raising the flare gun. "A guardian," she replied, her voice echoing in my skull. "The titans beneath this ice are stirring. Every time a human enters this peak, the seals weaken." She stepped closer, and I smelled salt, ozone, and the crushing solitude of millennia. "My people are tired. We are an ark, Elias. A bridge between what was and what must survive the coming silence." She reached out a hand. Her fingers were long, tipped with sharp, black nails that looked like obsidian. "Your friends weren't enough. Their codes were incompatible. But you, your blood carries the legacy we need to anchor the seals." Another tremor, more violent than the last, threw me to my knees. A fissure opened in the floor, and a reddish, pulsating glow began to leak through the cracks. The heat was sudden and intense, melting the frost on the walls in seconds. "The choice is simple," she whispered, leaning over me. "Join us and become a legend, a father to a new humanity hidden in the dark, or become another statue of flesh, a silent witness to the end." I looked at the flare gun in my hand, then at the glowing fissure. If what she said was true, the mountain wasn't just a mountain, it was a prison, and I was being asked to be the new warden. "You're using them," I said, gesturing toward the hallway where Miller's husk still lingered. "You didn't save them. You hollowed them out." "Survival has a price," she said, her golden eyes fixed on mine. "I do not seek submission. I seek an alliance." I realized then that the frequency the team had found wasn't a distress call. It was a lure. Like a predator using a bioluminescent light in the deep, she had called out to the surface, waiting for someone with the right genetic marker to climb into her trap. I fired the flare gun, not at her, but at the overhead fire suppression tanks filled with liquid nitrogen. The explosion was deafening. A cloud of supercooled gas filled the room. The queen shrieked, a sound like grinding tectonic plates, as the cold touched her iridescent skin. She recoiled, her movements losing their fluid grace as her physiology struggled to adapt to the sudden drop in temperature. I used the chaos to grab a fire axe from the wall and smash the manual override for the airlock. The door hissed open. I lunged into the sub-zero night. I didn't go for the snowcat. I knew she'd expect that. I threw myself over the ridge, sliding down the treacherous eastern slope toward the auxiliary landing pad where the emergency chopper was stationed. The wind was a hammer, but the adrenaline kept the hypothermia at bay. I reached the chopper, fueled and ready for the morning departure. I didn't bother with a pre-flight check. I cranked the engine, the rotors screaming as they fought the ice buildup. As I lifted off, I looked back at Outpost 0. The station was glowing, not with blue light, but with a blinding, incandescent white. The tremors had stopped. The violet sky was being sucked into a vortex directly above the drill site. I made it back to the base camp 6 hours later. I was babbling, talking about snake-eyed men and horned queens. They put me in the infirmary, treated me for severe exhaustion and frostbite. They told me a rescue team had been dispatched to Outpost 0 as soon as the weather cleared. 2 days later, the debriefing officer, a man with a cold, empty stare, sat by my bed. "We found them, Elias," he said softly. "The bodies?" I asked. "No. The team. Sarah, Miller, Dr. Eris. They're all fine. A bit shaken by the storm, but they're currently being processed at the regional headquarters." I froze. "That's impossible. I saw them. I saw what they became." The officer leaned in, his face devoid of emotion. "They said you had a breakdown, that you attacked the station, destroyed the equipment, and fled in a stolen chopper. They said you were raving about monsters." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small glass vial. Inside was a silvery, dancing liquid that seemed to hold captured stars. "Dr. Eris said you dropped this during your episode. He set it on the nightstand. He called it a gift for your service." I looked at the vial, then at the officer. As he turned to leave, the light caught his eyes. For a split second, the pupils weren't round. They were vertical, golden. I reached for my neck, feeling the skin. It was cold, too cold for the room's temperature. And there, right at the base of my throat, I felt it. A small, hard lump under the skin. A black pearl. The twist wasn't that I hadn't escaped. The twist was that I was the only one who hadn't finished the transformation yet. I wasn't the survivor. I was the carrier. The radio silence wasn't because they were gone. It was because they no longer needed words to speak. And as I looked in the mirror, my own eyes began to shimmer with a silver and green glow. I wasn't going home. I was just the first piece of the abyss brought down to the world of men.